Today I show an idea that I have developed with the goal of fully automating Sitecore development. For that demo, I'm using a fresh installation of the latest JSS starter kit running localhost. I'm using a Figma MCP server from FrameLink. This is the Figma file I will be using. We will be implementing all those variants of this card component in Sitecore. I'm also using this SiteKit CLI I have developed and which we will cover in details as we demo. So starting, let's start with a tenant. Uh, and a new site. Now, what we do, first thing, we call SiteKit init. Now, what we do, first thing, we call SiteKit init demo. It was supposed to be site. That's fine. What it does, it creates a folder in your root with those YAML files. We can start with the component file. Here you can see there is a schema at the top and a symbol of how you can define a component in that YAML with all the properties, but all commented out, and two working samples of two different components. We can start now with our first prompt. What I'm doing here from the Figma file I shared earlier, I asked a very simple prompt to add to the components YAML the card component and all its variant. While that is working, let's take a look how a component can be described on the YAML file. First, you have name, category. Category usually is page content, page structure. Those are the folders for component. And you can add multiple fields. The only two required properties here are name and type. All the others are optional. You can see you can define standard value for it. You can also, it adds by default in a section called content, but if you want, you can add in a different section the field. You can define a query. You can define an icon, also optional, variants, parameters. Those are all optional and they are self-explanatory. In rendering, you also have the ability of setting any value to any field in Sitecore for the rendering that is getting created by this component. Okay, our prompt is done. I can see add. I will actually remove that card. It probably doesn't exist in Sitecore. And I don't want any style option either. Let's just go with whatever it gave us of fields in all the different variants. Now our second prompt is going to be same thing from the file in Figma, please, to the implementation of a Sitecore component called cars. I gave it instructions where to add. But again, that's a very simple prompt, just for the sake of this demo. One good thing here is that the model, the AI model, it has the context of how the component is described in this YAML file. You can read all the variants from here. You can see what are the fields. So that context is important for the implementation. Again, while that is running, let's take a look on a different file settings. This also got created automatically, and this one is mostly used to define what are the locations where you want to create items in Sitecore. As you might have guessed, this CLI will transform all the elements that we described in this YAML file into Sitecore items, and those Sitecore items will be stored on those folders that are described here. The default section, I plan to move that to its own file. And the idea of defaults is where you can give defaults for all the items that are being created. Usually when you have a workflow, a page workflow, you want that page workflow for all pages you created. Same for language fallback. Most often when you are using language fallback, you want to enable or disable to all components and page types. So you can do that in one single place. Okay, our prompt is done. The card is created. I'm not even looking here. Let's go and call now SiteKit deploy. And start creating all items in Sitecore. Going back to my Sitecore. You can see here that we can add the content wrapper that was defined in the YAML file. And inside the content wrapper, only my rich text. We don't have the card yet, and I know why. So let me just save the content wrapper, go back to our YAML. And the thing is, we never told that a card is allowed to be added into a container wrapper. For that, we use composition. Here, you see my rich text. By doing this, I'm saying that content wrapper add common, which is described here, and I call deploy again. Now we should be able to add our card. This is our card. We can see different variants. And those are all, let me get one that has an image. This, you can see, is managed in Sitecore. Same for the rich text, for the body text, and title here. Now let's look into different YAML files that got created for us here. We start with partials, partials that are partial designs in Sitecore. And as an example, when we call init, it gives you a header and footer. You can add any partial design here. And by convention, I'm using header and footer. If your partial is called header or footer, they will be both used as the site header and site footer. In components, let's do something else. Under our under our card, let's add a header component. Say it's page structure, and we can add also a footer component. And in partials, now we can use those to define our header and footer. So here we have IntelliSense with all completed. So you can see, we can say what is the placeholder name, what are the children. In this case, I want the header. And for footer, same thing, footer. I do have handy here implementation of header and footer. Let me move this content wrapper. So I have a header and footer and a proper content wrapper here. Header and footer is just that, just a React element. Now, let me see if I saved everything. Yes. We can call deploy again. And in Sitecore, we can open in preview. We have our header and footer located. We can also define page types in these YAMLs. So for my page types, I want to create a new, it's a blog page. And insert option here, I need to add a blog page into a page. I don't want any insert options for blog pages, but I want something else. Before, let me add more components to my component library. Here I want one column. Let's start adding layout components. Yes. Yes, and I also want 2 columns Y left. In composition, I defined all those 4 layout components. Now in composition, what I want to do is same as we have for content wrapper here. I need to add those, and here is where I name my placeholder and I say what goes into that placeholder. It's giving me a wrong suggestion too. That's exactly what we need. On the left side, we can add comma. On the right, so we can have different available renderings on different placeholder settings. That's right. I don't have these 3 columns. That's right. So we defined the allowed controls on the placeholders. Moving back to components, we also want, let's say I have a component which is used to add the item body and the item text. this component will add the page title and page body in a page, so it doesn't have a data source. And let me also create, I don't know, blog text list. Let's imagine that's a navigation component that goes on the right rail in a blog post. Let's say it's also page content. Composition again. I want to include my page body here. I'm not adding the blog tag list anywhere because that's not something authors you add. That's going to be automatically added to my page. And to do that, what we can do, we go to page type, similar to what we've done with partials. We can add layout property, container wrapper. Everything starts with container wrapper, then it goes to a 2-column white left. That's what I want. The thing here is placeholder left and children, my rich text. Not my rich text, sorry. Page body. And similarly, we define again the component so we can access the right placeholder. And here we add our blog text list on the right side. I believe that's all. We call deploy again. We can see insert option was defined. Let's add a blog page. And if we go in Experience Editor, we can see define the header and footer, and this component wasn't created for that is because I forgot to say that in composition you also need to say what goes into the pages. So in my case here, I'm going to say that I can add containers. And one other thing I want, you can see that all the containers, they only add common, but for container wrapper, I want to be able to nest containers. So let's add containers here as well. In that case, we can add a content wrapper inside of content wrapper, a one column inside a content wrapper. And here we are using groups. Groups are just a logical element. It doesn't represent anything in Sitecore. That's the same of repeating all the components here. When I have common, it's the same of doing this. We can do either. You can mix groups with component names. So now we call deploy again. And let me refresh. Now we can see the page button and the tags list. They are not side by side. That's my implementation, which is wrong. Let me get a right implementation of the 2-column white left. Just deleting that one here. And now it looks better. What happens when you call deploy and there is a container component like this with composition where we can add things? The CLI will automatically create a file if it doesn't exist already with the name for the component and with all the placeholders available one next to each other. It doesn't add any special logic. It's just add the component here. That's is to facilitate anyone who is creating those components. At least you get right away your placeholder key. So it's easy. And last, let's do another component. Why not? We can create an accordion here, just accordion. Page content is fine. That accordion doesn't have any fields. Accordion panel. And this one does have a field. And default, we want the token name. Those are the fields we need. Now, in composition, I need to add my accordion to my group and define that an accordion takes not common, but accordion panel. Okay, we call deploy again. Our accordion is available. And into our accordion, we can add the panel. It doesn't have any implementation yet, but we can ask. Whatever, let's see what it does with this prompt. You can see that the model used the component YAML as reference. Okay, let's see. It created our panel. We added some CSS. We keep it all. And we go back, we see the panel. Let's add another panel. You can see the panels here. It's not great, but it behaves like an accordion. And you can see here the default text we added and the default token name that was replaced by the item name. And that's pretty much it. So that CLI tool is a way to transform those YAML files into Sitecore items. You can see that they do not map one-to-one with Sitecore items. They are an abstraction of some elements like components or page types, and then the CLI can parse it